Hello and welcome to the Savvy Ladies webinar. I'm Maggie Montemuro and I'm the Marketing Manager at Savvy Ladies. If you have a question during the webinar, you can use the chat box. And if you're joining us by phone, you can email your question to info@savvyladies.org. Today's presenter is Lynnette Khalfani Cox, the Money Coach. Lynnette is a personal finance expert and radio personality who has appeared on hundreds of TV programs, including Oprah, Dr. Phil, and The Today Show. She is a former financial news journalist who now teaches individuals nationwide how to better manage their finances. Lynnette is the CEO of the MoneyCoach.net LLC, a financial education company. Some of Lynnette's previous experience before launching the MoneyCoach.net in 2003 includes a Wall Street Journal reporter for CNBC and a reporter and editor at Dow Jones. Lynnette is the author of 12 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Zero Debt, The Ultimate Guide to Financial Freedom. Thanks for joining us today, Lynnette, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Maggie, for that introduction. Very much appreciate it. I wanted to take a quick minute before we launch into the formal part of the presentation and give a huge thank you to those of you joining me today. We're actually going to be talking about one of my very favorite topics because this is really all about money. And so it really doesn't matter if you are already in a relationship like I am. This will be year 10 for me in terms of my anniversary this year with my husband. I got it right the second time around. The first time was not so good, but I wanted to share some financial tips for out there, whether you're married, whether you're single, in a relationship, committed, or just, kind of moving towards a path where you feel like, yeah, I'll be happier in my life. So thank you so much for joining us today. And without further ado, let's kind of launch right in. So this session, as you know, is being sponsored by Savvy Ladies, and I'm so super happy to do this presentation for them. Thank you again to Maggie and the entire team at Savvy Ladies. They've been great, and I'm really excited about all these Wednesday webinars, these these Wednesday wisdom webinars for people like me who get a chance to share what we know. As I mentioned, and as Maggie did as well, I'm Lynnette Khalfani Cox. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Coach.com. Certainly feel free to connect with me on social media, whether that's on Twitter. My handle is @TheMoneyCoach. Everything is The Money Coach, Facebook, YouTube, all that good stuff. So let me share with you first some of the objectives and the three main lessons that I hope that you'll get out of today's webinar. First, I want you to really understand the 5 most common money problems that couples face. And frankly, this is stuff that newlyweds go through, long-term married couples often face, people who are dating, etc. Then I want to teach you 3 key steps to effectively deal with money problems and frankly marital problems that tie in with fiscal issues. It's a 3-step process that I personally developed, and I hope it's going to be great for you to help you to have more financial harmony in your relationship. And that's the very last goal or lesson in today's session. I want you to know how to promote harmony in your relationship. Financial harmony, yes, how to get on the same page with your mate, but also certain non-financial ways that you can do just that, okay? So what are these 5 mistakes that most couples make? Well, frankly, the first mistake is trying to change somebody. So the fact of the matter is, all of us have our own normal personalities, right? Some people are introverts, some people are extroverts, some people are kind of go-getters and very ambitious, other people are laid back. Well, just like you have your normal temperament and personality, you have money personalities as well. So some of us are spenders, some of us are savers, some of us are splurgers, hoarders, planners, impulse buyers. We all have different money personalities. And I can tell you unequivocally, after having been a money coach for the last 14 years and coaching countless people, one of the frustrations for a lot of people is when you just instantly try to change someone. Just like it doesn't work in your relationship to try to change their normal personality, it doesn't work to try to change their sort of temperament, their fiscal temperament, and their financial personality. Another mistake is joining your accounts way too soon. Sometimes in the rush to kind of get down the aisle or to be in a more established relationship, we do things that are premature financially, like taking on loans and credit accounts, creating joint accounts prior to marriage, etc. I really think that's a big mistake. Third error, keeping financial secrets. I'm going to touch a little later on financial infidelity, but suffice to say for now that keeping money secrets from your spouse or mate or your significant other is a quick way to ruin in a relationship, and it erodes trust. The fourth mistake is avoiding what I call the money talk. And really, it's about those who avoid the series of money talks that all of us need to do, because frankly, money should be an ongoing part of the dialogue and the communication in your relationship. It really helps to strengthen things. Finally, some couples invest more in stuff, in things, than in the actual relationship or their marriage. They're so concerned about the house, the car, the things that they have, the upgraded kitchen, the granite countertops, or whatever, track of what's really important in terms of keeping a sustainable relationship going. So, how can you battle some of these problems? How can you combat some of these issues and better have better communication with your partner, your spouse, your mate, your significant other? I tell you to do a 3-step process that I call disclose, decide. And here's what it breaks down to. And some of this may be kind of eye opening for you. And you may sort of say, I'm not sure if this could work in my relationship. It depends on where you are in the stage. But I think that anybody in a serious relationship should definitely be able to do all 3 of these steps. The first step, step 1, is about disclosing certain information. And it requires both of you to have financial transparency and honesty in disclosing things like your income, what kind of debts you owe. Do you have student loans? Do you have credit card debt? Do you send money back home to somebody? Do you support other family members? What's your credit look like? Do you have pristine, kind of perfect, stellar credit? Or is your credit, kind of in need of work? Again, if you're in a serious relationship, living together, engaged, already married, you should definitely know these things. Okay, that's step 1, disclose. So, why is disclosure important? I mentioned before, it's all about financial honesty. And what's the opposite of that? Financial dishonesty. Some people call it financial infidelity. There was a survey done, and believe it or not, 60% of couples, both men and women, that financial infidelity was just as devastating to them as cheating, as sexual infidelity. In other words, if you're keeping money secrets from your partner and he finds out about it or she finds out about it, they can be devastated. They can force a violation of trust and think, if you're hiding this money secret from me, what else are you hiding? So you definitely don't want that to be the case. Step 2 is all about discussing the things that are important in your relationship. Not only financial things that have happened, but what happened in your partner's past before you even met the person. What is the situation that happened prior, perhaps, to you guys getting together, so that you have a full understanding of where they are now financially and how they got there. Sometimes the key to sort of delving into somebody's money personality and understanding their financial circumstances is about understanding their influences, the sphere of influence they might have, their circle of friends and their parents, and how they were brought up, how they were raised to deal with fiscal matters, even how they were raised to deal with successes and failures. Because a lot of times people have sort of emotional and behavioral reactions to success or failure are often manifested in financial ways. So somebody who, say, gets a big promotion on the job and is feeling like woohoo, maybe that person goes out and buys a new car or upgrades something that they had on the technology side or whatever. So you really kind of need to get a handle on that and understand How is it that somebody got where they are right now? And the only way you're going to do that is by communicating effectively and discussing those things that are important. Now, a note on how to discuss it and when. Timing matters, okay? Just like everything else in your relationship, there's nothing more frustrating for someone else, your husband, mate, partner, whoever, than for you to sort of launch into some big, heavy conversation about money or to try to delve into that person's past at the wrong time. What do I mean by the wrong time? When the game is on, when they're in the middle of trying to do something important, right before they want to go to bed or they're sleepy or tired, when they're in an angry mood, after they're frustrated about something, timing really matters. You also should be non-judgmental. I call it being judgment free and also compassionate with whatever they tell you. This is not the time to point fingers and lay blame and to make somebody feel guilty. If your partner is opening up to you about how they got to where they are today or why it is they are a certain way in terms of their money personality, you don't want to start nitpicking and attacking and being negative. Okay. I'll remind you of something that it says in the Bible. Again, I happen to be Christian, but I don't impose my beliefs on people and say, oh, you must. But I'm just reminding you of something that's wise from the Bible in Ephesians 4:32, where it references the need to be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ forgave you. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind with whatever you might hear when you're in a discussion mode with your partner. Now, here's a tip or a suggestion about some of the things that you might say or how you might bring up the conversation and what really the sort of first part of the money conversation should be. It's not about, how much debt do you have right now? What's your credit score? And certainly not on the first date, certainly not too early or in a premature fashion. It's just a way for you to um, delve into the person's past, certainly, but to do it in a way that's conversational and just asking them, so, how was money handled in your household when you were growing up? Some people had two parents in the household, their parents stayed together, others had divorced parents. So maybe the mom was the one who handled all the money if the mom was the only one there, or maybe it was a traditional nuclear family, but the mom still handled all the money. That's important to know. um, did your parents argue about money? Were there arguments about money? Because again, that person you're talking to, they've likely been influenced by their own childhood, their upbringing, and it would behoove you to kind of know what some of that was like for them. Okay. Step three is about deciding. And what you want to decide is how you're going to move forward as a couple together. You really want to think about specific things that will make your relationship work and that it'll create a healthy environment for both of you to operate. And one of the key things that most couples ultimately have to grapple with, and again, if you're single right now, you're not in a relationship, not a problem, but just anticipate that when you are in a partnership, this will be an issue that you'll have to address as well, single ladies. So, most people like to have a sense of autonomy, a sense of independence. The same is true, believe it or not, for fiscal independence. So, you'll have to decide together for you as a couple what is best and workable in terms of financial independence. You'll also have to think about what's a priority in terms of your goals, because no doubt each of you will have individual goals, but then you'll have joint and collective goals as a couple, and you need to decide what is the priority. Okay. When deciding, some of the things will be specific, like how are we going to do certain goals that we establish? How are we going to pay off debt, for example? If we've, as a couple, if we already have amassed, say, $10,000 in credit card debt, which is about the average nationwide per US household, how are we going to pay off that debt? Some people want to do it organically, using their savings, making extra payments on their credit cards. Some people might think about loans, other loans. Should we tap the equity in our house? Should we consider a 401k loan to pay off our credit card debt, that kind of thing? I don't recommend the 401k loan personally. I like the approach of paying off your debts organically, but that's a decision that you'll have to discuss and then arrive at. How will we save more money? Will we start to cut back? Will we do some things that we do now less or less frequently? What about investing? What's the priority? If we have children, should we be investing an equal amount for retirement or towards our kids' college education fund? You understand what I'm saying? You have to determine together and decide what is the priority. Okay. Now, I mentioned before about autonomy and the sense of uh, financial independence. One of the key things that you'll need to talk out with your mate is having joint accounts or having separate accounts. Now, here's the pros or the advantages of separate accounts. Each party maintains a great sense of financial independence. Typically, it's going to lead to fewer arguments. And you also have the advantage of building your own financial skills in terms of learning how to balance a checkbook, managing money on your own, and building your credit potentially as well if you keep separate credit accounts. You can have your credit built, of course, when you have a joint account, but as an party, it can be advantageous to you to have your own credit accounts as well. Now, I'm going to stop sharing the slides here and just chat for a moment because I really want to emphasize this point about financial independence and separate accounts. And in particular, I want to raise two questions or two issues with you. Some people think that, oh, if you're married already in a committed relationship and you're already sort of tied together, presumably for life, right? They say, why would you possibly have separate accounts? It's contrary to the point or the goal or whatever of marriage. I don't really believe that that's the case. Um, so if you are single in a relationship, dating, seriously engaged, or already married, and let's say your mate comes to you and says, I want a prenup, or I want a separate account, I want to manage our fiscal accounts separately. It may feel a little bit like a sting, perhaps a little slap in the face, but honestly, it's really not an affront to the relationship. It's no reflection of the fact that your partner doesn't care about you or love you as much. So I don't want you to mistakenly think that someone who asks you for separate accounts loves you any less, than somebody else who's in a relationship and they have joint accounts with their mates. Don't feel like that at all because it's really not the case. Now, I mentioned also having separate credit accounts. We know that unfortunately, 50%, over 50% of all couples wind up divorced. And so a lot of only have credit as, say, an authorized user with your husband, let's say, as the primary account holder. You'll need to establish credit on your own. Again, certainly not wishing separation, divorce, or even the death of a spouse on you to have to deal with as a circumstance, but I'm pointing out the wisdom of having your own separate credit accounts, that it can actually be helpful in more ways than one. Okay, so I'm going to return to the slides here, but I just wanted to kind of make some points there about the pros of separate accounts, because I think sometimes people say, hey, why should we have separate accounts? I want to know everything and I want to have everything sort of connected. And I certainly don't suggest that you shouldn't know things. On the contrary, I say that you should, but I also know that there are advantages to also having separate accounts. Okay, so I hope I've highlighted some of that for you. Um, let's talk about the cons now of separate accounts. Obviously, there is the potential for violations of trust. What do I mean by that? The secret spending, the infidelity. I've heard of horror stories of the mistress on the side, or the other accounts that someone didn't know about, that kind of thing. When I say separate accounts, I don't mean separate accounts that your mate does not know about. I don't mean something that you're keeping hidden or keeping assets on the side or something like that. If you choose to maintain separate accounts, your partner should know about them, but there's less sort of say so, if you will, less opportunity for that person to have control over how the funds are managed in that account. Often reduce friction. But two of the other cons or disadvantages and drawbacks of having separate accounts are that um, Power and control issues can definitely emerge. Now, they can, frankly, with joint accounts too, but um, typically you'll see a little more of that because the conversations around who pays for what should be done when, how money is being spent or used, and the potential, again, the seeming level of secrecy perhaps for some couples makes those issues a little more thorny to deal with. And then I think the third risk is a very relevant one in terms of the lack of financial cohesion, or at least the risk of that happening. In other words, maybe you guys are planning for retirement. It could be a couple decades down the road. It could be 5 years from now, who knows? But the idea is that if you have, say, separate investment accounts and you never collaborate or let the other party know what kind of assets you're holding, et cetera, you could have duplication of your assets, and it might not be as advantageous for you financially just because you guys aren't aware of what the other person is doing. Okay. All right. The pros of joint accounts, obviously, both parties have clear insights into what's going on. So you have more financial transparency. Generally, there's a lot more communication around money issues under those circumstances. Everybody can see what's going on with the bank accounts, for example, and that might lead to more conversation. Many couples talk about a stronger feeling of trust and togetherness around fiscal issues and other things as well. So those are the pros of having joint accounts. The cons, more potential money squabbles. Why did you spend on this? And you took out this money and you didn't tell me, and now I wrote a check and the check bounced or whatever, that kind of thing, right? And as I mentioned earlier, there is a risk of being vested, so to speak, too soon, too vested too soon, especially if you're not yet married. And that's my benchmark in terms of when you should combine accounts. I personally don't believe that you should do it before marriage. And that's when I say personally, I mean personally as a money coach, that's my professional advice for when you should actually combine joint accounts if you are going to do that. But I think really the ideal situation, the sort of happy medium, if you will, is to do both. Is to have both joint and separate accounts. That separate account can be used for your own independence, autonomy, and control. Nope, you don't have to ask for permission. You don't have to tell every little thing what you're spending on, that kind of thing. It's generally a good idea, though, for the two of you to agree on set numbers. So, just for the sake of illustration, you might say, you know what, in my separate account, I can spend and do whatever I want to spend some money on. But perhaps if you have a certain level of spending, let's say you have, a set point of $250 or more, $500 or more, whatever the number might be. Again, you talk it out with your partner and establish that. But together, you guys say, okay, if either one of us spends above X dollars, we'll give the other party a heads up. We'll let the other person know. Again, it fosters greater trust, personal and financial intimacy, and a sense of teamwork that can really play itself out in other ways in your relationship. So I would encourage you to do that, even if you are choosing to have separate accounts exclusively. Okay. The advantage advantage of having both separate and joint accounts is that you can just use that joint account to pay for the household bills, to do things that you have collectively agreed are in both of your interests and that represent both of your goals. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about secret spending, if you will. And I want to pose a question to some of you because, frankly, this is guilty of in the past. And I'm going to be totally honest here. Does your mate or your spouse know what you buy and what you charge? Now, you know, you don't have to tell them every single thing that is uh, spent out of your wallet or every single thing that you charge, but you kind of know if you're engaging in financial infidelity, if you are hiding purchases. You know what I'm talking about, right? Putting stuff in your trunk of the car so they won't see it, or maybe putting things in the back of the closet and just sort of hiding that. And, then when you pull out, that black dress or whatever, and he says, "Oh, is that new?" You're kind of like, "Oh, this old thing, I've had this forever," that kind of stuff. So if you are engaging in that kind of hiding of your purchases and financial infidelity, I want to tell you to check that, because those little quote unquote white lies can, snowball and become bigger issues. And I just don't want you to have financial infidelity become a factor in your relationship. Certainly not a factor potentially for distrust and anything that might lead towards a breakup. Okay. All right. So, in addition to your mate knowing or not knowing what you spend, some people might have the mindset that, look, it's my money, and what he doesn't know doesn't hurt him. Again, I want to challenge you, because put the shoe on the other foot. If the situation were reversed and it was the other way around, would you be upset? Would you sort of say, I don't want you to be out there spending on XYZ or something that I don't know about? Again, every relationship is different. And I'm not suggesting that you have to tell your partner every single iota, everything that you buy or spend, but just think about that mindset and what it can breed and foster. Because if you start behaving that way, you know what? Sometimes what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So he might start doing the same thing. So I just want to warn you about that. Really, at the end of the day, a lot of financial issues can sort of circle around or be rooted in issues of power and control. Sometimes if you have a joint account, you might feel like my partner has a vice grip on the wallet or on the bank account, and I can never spend or do anything. Again, it's going to be crucial to talk through some of those things. The power and control issues can be, again, rooted in everything from how your partner saw money issues handled in his family or his household. Maybe the dad always managed the money and said and did everything in terms of the decision making, and so now he might feel entitled, or that's the normal proper way for it to be handled. Okay. um, but at the end of the day, if you sort of forget about the dollars themselves in terms of your conversations, in terms of your connecting with your mate, and don't think so much cash, think more compassion, because you'd be surprised at the level of financial honesty, how much financial transparency, and how much buy-in even you can get from your partner when you're willing to be understanding about why it is they spend a certain way, save a certain way, want to invest a certain way, want to handle finances a certain way. At the very least, if you show a level of understanding or willingness to listen, it will definitely foster greater communication. And greater communication around money issues certainly can lead to greater communication around a whole host of topics that you will deal with in your relationship. And frankly, money issues for a lot of couples actually tends to be sort of the bane of their existence. 7 out of 10 couples that divorce cite strife, financial strife, as part of the reason for the breakup. So think about the ways in which you can not let just the pure dollars and cents be the deciding factor around what you're arguing about, and whether or not you two connect on various issues. I also want to answer this question for those of you who might be wondering if you have opposite money personalities. Can a spender and a saver survive? Absolutely. You can thrive together. In fact, I often say that I feel like it's a kind of a cruel joke that God played on us that frequently financial opposites will be paired together, will be attracted to one another, and will ultimately marry. So, yes, unequivocally, financial opposites can survive and thrive together, even as long as you're both willing to work at the relationship, to work on the financial issues, to talk about things, utilize those 3 steps that I referred to earlier in this presentation, and to be on the same page financially. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about, trying to achieve financial harmony with your spouse. Let me share with you, as we're coming to a close here, something that I do in my own relationship. It's a non-financial strategy, but it definitely promotes financial harmony in my relationship with my husband, Earl. And as I mentioned, we're going on 10 years This year will be our 10-year anniversary. We're super happy together. I'm so thrilled because I have a partner that I can talk about money issues, family, child rearing, and a whole host of other issues. We own our financial education company together, and so we run a business together. We literally sit side by side every single day. So you know that there's a high degree of friendship and communication and trust there, just to be able to work together day in and day out. So Earl is a thoughtful person who likes to plan and who will ponder about things, whereas I am also a planner, but more impulsive. So frequently in past years in our relationship, he would say something like, oh, I'm really exhausted and I'm tired. I feel sort of overworked. And I looked online and I saw this, this vacation package in Mexico. And I was kind of thinking about it. I don't know, maybe we should, think about a getaway or just kind of de-stress a little bit. And I was like, oh. So the next morning he'd wake up, I'd have the package booked, hotel, airfare, got the rental car, the whole shebang. And I did this to him a couple of times, honestly, before he ultimately shared with me, Lynnette, I was just kind of thinking about it. Like I said, this was how I felt in the moment. I wasn't really committed to it. I did want to think it over a little bit more. I was just sharing with you my thoughts and feelings in the moment. So I use that as an illustration, but suffice to say, it happened a lot of times in a lot of different things, not just travel. So he and I ultimately came up with this solution to better communicate with each other and to say, don't hold me to something if I'm just sharing with you. If I'm just talking off the top of my head, or if I'm just letting you get plugged into how I'm thinking and how I'm feeling in the moment, I don't want to be locked into that, or I don't want to be committed to that. Please give me the right to change my mind, to reassess, or to have a completely different point of view, 5 minutes or 5 days from now. So the strategy is something that we say to each other, and we say, today, this is how I feel. You would be shocked if you tried this with your partner, how much it opens up more honesty and communication, more transparency, more vulnerability with your partner. And your partner, again, will know and understand that, you know what, my wife, my mates, they may change 30 minutes from now, and they'll probably just listen like, oh, okay, and kind of be plugged into you and be sensitive to whatever it is you're feeling or thinking or going through in that moment. But it can also keep each one of you from doing something impulsive financially, or from locking you both into something. You might say, you know what, honey, today is how I'm feeling. Like, I think we should buy a new car, or maybe we should get a house, we should think about starting a business. It could be anything. Frequently, your personal goals and aspirations have a financial component to them. So I just wanted to share that strategy with you because it's helped me so much in my relationship, personally, frankly, even professionally, and certainly financially as well. And I wanted you to know, to be able to try it in your own relationship to see what it does for you. Okay. So we are going to wrap it up there because we're at the end of our time. And I definitely want to give you guys the opportunity to ask any questions you might have. Again, you see my social media handles there on Facebook, The Money Coach, Twitter, I'm at The Money Coach, on YouTube as well. If you'd like to connect with me around seeing some of my videos or the free content I have on my site, askthemoneycoach.com, over 1,600 articles on my blog there, and a lot that deal with this topic about love and money. I hope you've enjoyed today's presentation, and I really want to thank you again for taking the time to listen to me to get some financial tips for you single ladies and you married women as well.
Thank you, Lynnette. That was really great. And I just want to remind everyone, if you have a question, you can use the chat box or email info@savvyladies.org. And we had some questions come in already. And the first one here is, why do you recommend marriage first? Is this still recommended even for a joint account only for joint household expenses?
So the reason that I recommend marriage before combining accounts is, frankly, I've seen way too often the financial fallout and the damage that's done from prematurely connecting yourself on a credit standpoint, in a banking and a savings and a checking account standpoint with someone who isn't already your life partner. When you're married, you have certain protections under the law. When you're single, you won't have those protections. Additionally, because people tend to date and explore their relationships and see whether or not it works out, I think from a timing standpoint, with a little bit of hindsight and prudence, I think that most people who are older, who are more established in their relationships, who've been around the block once or twice and a little more experience, would also give you the same sort of practical wisdom, which is that you don't want to financially tie yourself to someone in a way that can cause disruption down the road, of course, if things don't work out. Now, granted, it's certainly the case that if you marry and then separate or divorce, again, there's going to be a financial split, a disruption. But again, you'll have certain protections in place and you'll have the ability to potentially bounce back, I think, sometimes a little better if you take the right steps as a divorced person, as opposed to a single person who just separated, and then you might not have as much recourse if somebody drains your bank account, if they do certain things to your credit rating or that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. And the next question we have is, I'm not married and I make a lot less than my partner. I feel a little embarrassed to talk about income. What can I do?
Oh, that's a great question. So, two things I would suggest if you're trying to talk to your partner about income and there's a big income disparity. So, one thing is to certainly let your partner know that you're not expecting for him to, financially support you or to um, pay for certain bills that might be your obligations, that kind of thing. So, what I would do in terms of broaching the subject, again, if you're in a serious relationship, just dating somebody, you've been dating a month, 2 months, 3 months, and potentially the person could date somebody else. You may or may not be thinking long term, the two of you. I wouldn't go into all of that. I don't think it's necessary or even in some cases advisable. I think you should watch and pay attention to things, but I don't think that you have to disclose your income or even know the other party's income. But if you are going to be serious about each other, if there's talk of staying together long term, moving in together, getting engaged, then yes, you should. And what I would do in terms of approaching the conversation is to frame it around your shared goals. So you might say, honey, if we are going to buy a house together or live together, we probably should talk out how we would handle our finances. What's your thoughts about having separate accounts versus joint accounts? And then sort of, play that conversation out in the way that I described earlier. You might also say, in terms of if we had a shared living arrangement, we lived together, married couple or as a committed couple living together, and we were going to pay our household bills, how do you think we should handle an income disparity? I think you probably make way more than I do, but I just wanted to share with you where I am right now and what I'm building towards. And you can just sort of lay the cards on the table. On my current job, I make $32,000, $18,000, $41,000. And, I feel like this is the level of bills that I would be able to handle or what I'd be able to responsibly pay month after month without problems. But I wanted to also find out from you where you are. And, so you start the conversation that way. Believe it or not, this is a shocking study that I read in 2016. It showed that over half of all couples married couples, not just couples who are dating, serious, or living together. Literally, over half of all married couples did not know what their spouse earned. That blew me away. I was so shocked by that. And I think it speaks to the reluctance, the reticence, and the sort of anxiety that a lot of people feel around talking about money issues. That's crazy. I mean, are you guys filing taxes together? Don't you see what the income is? Now I could see if, there was maybe an entrepreneurial couple who didn't get a W-2 and, have an employer with a statement at the end, entrepreneurs whose incomes might be a little more volatile, but that wasn't the case. This was just across the board, over 50% of couples. That really shouldn't be the case. It might be a little uncomfortable at first, but once you get the conversation going, it's kind of like public speaking. A lot of people, that's the number one fear in life. People fear public speaking more than the fear of death, believe it or not. But typically, once you get going, you'll settle in, you'll be just fine. And same is true for your money conversations.
Okay, great. Thank you. And another question we have for you is, my fiance continues to help his adult children with money. I think he's enabling his daughter. I'm afraid it will never end, and after we marry, we'll need to save more for retirement. I feel awful, but I'm afraid I will start to resent his daughter. Do you have some advice for that?
Well, you shouldn't feel awful because what you're saying is probably 100% true. You mentioned that your fiance has an adult daughter, so I assume he's, older, baby boomer or older. I happen to be a money expert for AARP, so I frequently talk to the 50 plus crowd. And I can tell you that one of the biggest financial regrets that a lot of people in their 60s, 70s, and older express is things that they did wrong with family members in terms of helping that wayward son, or the nephew who was going to start a business and needed a loan and never repaid the money, that kind of thing. So I do think that this is a very real issue, and that a lot of parents do enable their adult children. In fact, it gets to the point of what I call financially abusive relationships. What is a financially abusive relationship? That's what happens anytime someone that you know, trust, or love takes economic advantage of you. And frankly, children, adult children, are the biggest proponents of this. Certainly, financial infidelity can happen among siblings, it can happen among spouses, but adult children are frequently the ones who perpetuate financial abuse on their parents. And it starts typically young. They might be that boomerang kid who came back from college or who never quite, got that first job. It might be the person living in their basement. It might be the kid who can't quite hold down a job, or who is constantly asking for money for the car payment, the insurance, the cell phone, the utilities. Oh, help me with my rent. So the strategy is really, first, of course, you have to talk to your fiance about this and express your concerns. You should say, we're getting older. And if we want to have a secure retirement, I'm concerned and I'm worried that, a lot of the money that's going towards your daughter is obviously going to be resources that we won't have. I don't want to disenfranchise your daughter. I understand you love her. I love her too. But I do think it's time for her to have more financial independence, more financial autonomy, and do more to stand on her own 2 feet. So only you know the specific circumstances and what she's done or what she hasn't done. But I do think it's worth a very direct conversation, again, with compassion, not attacking, not accusatory, not saying you always bail her out, not that kind of thing. Frame it in a way that you understand the source of this. And the source is simply love. All of us parents love our kids and we don't like to see them flailing or struggling. But at the same time, you also don't want to put yourself and your partner, of course, in the hole financially. And a lot of parents do just that, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Well, those are all the questions we had. So I want to thank you, Lynnette, for an excellent presentation, and thanks for sharing all your tips with us. Thanks also to everyone who joined us today. And thank you again so much, Lynnette. It was really, really great.
You're so very welcome. Thank you, Maggie, and the entire Savvy Ladies team.
Thank you. Have a good day.